Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are setting our sights on a landscape that kind of seems to defy the very concept of life. We're heading to the hottest, driest, and literally lowest place in North America, Death Valley National Park. Now, I know what you're thinking. The name alone brings up these images of a terrifying, barren wasteland where absolutely nothing can survive, right? And for generations, early explorers seriously believed that entering this valley was a one-way trip. But beneath that harsh, unforgiving reputation lies one of the most incredible survival stories in the natural world. So today, we're going to explore how an entire ecosystem doesn't just scrape by, but actually flourishes in one of our planet's most hostile environments.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Because to really appreciate the life here, we have to establish the extreme stakes we're dealing with. 134 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 56.7 degrees Celsius. That was the air temperature recorded at Furnace Creek back on July 10, 1913. It's been long recognized as one of the highest air temperatures ever measured anywhere on Earth. During the summer months, the heat here is just absolutely relentless. It acts like a giant natural oven that constantly challenges the very limits of biology.
And wow, it gets even more intense when you look at the surface itself. While the daytime air often hovers above 120 degrees, the ground temperatures, they can actually exceed 190 degrees Fahrenheit. That is literally hot enough to melt paved roads and instantly burn exposed skin. But here's the thing, the real saving grace happens at night. Once the sun goes down, temperatures can plummet by a massive 30 to 50 degrees. And that dramatic drop provides a crucial, life-saving window of relief. Without that cooling off period, survival here would be pretty much impossible.
So, you might be wondering, why on earth does it get this hot in the first place? Well, it all comes down to geography. We're looking at Badwater Basin, which sits at an unbelievable 282 feet below sea level. Over millions of years, the Earth's crust stretched out here, causing these massive basins to sink while the surrounding mountain ranges pushed upwards. It created this huge, dramatic, deep bowl. So as moist air from the Pacific rises over those mountains, it dumps its rain and becomes incredibly dry. By the time that heavy, dry air sinks down into this deep basin, it compresses and heats up, basically trapping the heat in this massive natural trap.
Now, all this extreme geography has led to a pretty massive misconception. The myth, of course, is that Death Valley is just a barren, terrifying wasteland completely devoid of life. But the reality? It's a total paradigm shift. Scientists have documented hundreds of plant species, dozens of mammals, hundreds of bird species, reptiles, insects, and, believe it or not, even fish living right here in the park. It's actually a vibrant, dynamic landscape teeming with hidden life. You just have to know exactly where and when to look.
Which brings us to a really fascinating question. It's basically the ultimate test of nature. How little is enough to survive? Death Valley is practically a giant natural laboratory for evolution. Every single organism living here has to constantly answer this question. Without water, well, life ends pretty quickly. So evolution has ruthlessly rewarded any adaptation that conserves moisture and beats the heat. Let's take a look at exactly how the locals pulled this off.
You can totally see this ultimate test of nature when we look at the animals here. The survival techniques are mind-blowing. Take the tiny kangaroo rat, for example. It might live its entire life without ever drinking a single drop of liquid water. No way, right? Instead, its body actually metabolizes and produces water internally just from digesting dry seeds. Then you've got these desert lizards that perform what's known as thermal dancing. They rapidly lift alternate feet off the scorching sand so they don't burn their toes. Coyotes have evolved these highly efficient kidneys to minimize water loss. And almost all the mammals survive by operating on a strict nocturnal schedule, sleeping in nice cool burrows during the day and only venturing out after the sun sets.
But think about this for a second. What if you can't migrate to find shade? Plants face an even tougher challenge because they have to survive exactly where they take root. And their strategies are just as incredible. Mesquite trees completely bypass the dry surface by growing massive root systems, up to 150 feet deep, just to tap into hidden groundwater. The creosote bush survives the salty, dry dirt by cloning itself. Some of these colonies are literally thousands of years old. And then there are the wildflowers. Their seeds can just lie dormant for decades beneath the hard earth, waiting patiently for that one perfect combination of rainfall and temperature to erupt in a spectacular, colorful superbloom.
But honestly, seeing all this abundance of flora and fauna begs a massive question, doesn't it? How does anything survive here without rivers? On average, the valley receives less than 2 inches of rain an entire year, and sometimes none at all. So where in the world is the water coming from to support this vibrant ecosystem?
Well, the answer is actually completely out of sight. Hidden aquifers are the invisible lifelines of this desert. You see, the surrounding mountains, like the 11,000-foot Telescope Peak, they actually get snow in the winter. And as that snow melts, the water slowly seeps deep down into the cracked rock. It travels underground for centuries, sometimes even thousands of years, before it finally bubbles up to the surface at these scattered little desert springs. So the water nourishing an oasis today, it might have fallen as snow long before modern civilization even existed.
And inside those rare, ancient pools of water, we find one of the most astonishing survivors on the entire planet, the desert pupfish. These tiny little fish live in isolated, oxygen-deprived spring pools, where the water temperature can regularly exceed 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Conditions that would instantly kill most fish are just a normal Tuesday for them. They're living relics, direct descendants of the fish that swam in the massive ancient lakes that covered Death Valley all the way back during the Ice Age.
And this brilliantly illustrates the dynamic nature of water here. Because, when the water doesn't come from below, it comes from above. And it comes with shocking violence. The flash flood cycle is basically nature's sculptor. Sudden, intense mountain thunderstorms act like giant funnels. In a matter of minutes, bone-dry washes completely transform into roaring torrents of water, mud, and massive boulders. This floodwater rushes down, depositing sediments into these broad, fan-shaped formations called alluvial fans. Now, while it's extremely dangerous, this cycle is vital. It recharges the groundwater, it spreads nutrients around, and it awakens those dormant seeds we talked about earlier, sparking an absolute explosion of life.
Now, to truly wrap our heads around this landscape, we really need to zoom way out and look at the massive timeline of Death Valley. We are talking about exposed rocks that formed 1.7 billion years ago. That is way before the dinosaurs. Fast forward to the Ice Age, and a massive body of water called Lake Manly filled this entire valley. Thousands of years ago, as those lakes dried up, the Timbisha Shoshone Native Americans arrived and beautifully adapted to the changing climate. And then, much later, in 1849, the famous gold rush pioneers stumbled into the basin, completely unprepared for the extreme environment they'd just walked into.
In fact, it was actually those 1849 immigrants who gave the valley its terrifying name in the first place. Trapped in the basin for weeks, running out of food, running out of water, they finally managed to find a route out. Legend has it that as they were leaving, one pioneer looked back and simply said, "Goodbye, Death Valley." It's a stark contrast, isn't it? The pioneers saw only danger and hardship, whereas the Timbisha Shoshone, through generations of ancestral knowledge, they understood the rhythm of the seasons. They knew exactly where the hidden springs flowed, and they saw this immense landscape as a bountiful home. Now, what's really interesting about this environment is how it creates these literal geological puzzles. For decades, one of the greatest mysteries in science was the moving rocks of racetrack playa. Heavy boulders literally appeared to slide across the flat, dry lake bed all by themselves, leaving these long trails in the mud.
For years, absolutely no one knew how it was happening, but scientists finally solved it. It turns out it requires a delicate, almost magical combination of events. Shallow winter rain freezes into a thin sheet of ice. As the morning sun begins to melt that ice, even a very light breeze can push these floating ice sheets, which then gently drag the heavy rocks across the slippery mud. It's just a brilliant, perfect combination of water, ice, and wind. So when you look at all of this together, the moving rocks, the tiny pupfish, the kangaroo rats, those gorgeous super blooms, the ultimate takeaway of this explainer becomes crystal clear. Death Valley is absolutely not a symbol of death. It is a profound symbol of endurance. It proves that life doesn't require perfect, comfortable conditions to exist. It simply requires incredible adaptation, timing, and extreme efficiency. Every single plant and animal here has earned its place through millions of years of rigorous evolution.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to chew on. You see, our global climate is changing, and scientists are actually using Death Valley as a laboratory to study exactly how ecosystems respond to rising temperatures and prolonged droughts. So if life can find a way to not just survive, but to truly thrive in the absolute harshest place on Earth, what does that teach us about the resilience of our changing planet? It's a really powerful reminder that nature possesses extraordinary powers of renewal, and that life, against all odds, is astonishingly resilient. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep exploring the incredible wonders of our world.